Have a Keekster there, and welcome to the Bad Dream series review. The Bad Dream series is a series of point-and-click games released by developer Desert Fox. If you're wondering why it's hard to attach a certain number of games to the series, then let me explain with a quick timeline. Bad Dream Butcher was released on Game Jolt on Christmas Eve of 2013. The first 5 Bad Dream games were intended to be short, 20-minute point-and-click experiences, and they released from Butcher until Bad Dream Memories on March 27, 2014. Then Bad Dream Bridge released in November of 2014 and is described as part of the bigger game Bad Dream Coma. This is where it becomes hard to call this a separate game since it was pretty much intended as a preview for the next one. However, there is also merit to call it a separate game since it isn't just the first half hour of Coma, but it instead features different puzzles and even an inventory mechanic which worked differently in Coma. So for the purposes of this video, it will be considered a separate game due to these pretty big differences in just the puzzles of the game. Now then, Bad Dream Coma released on Steam in March of 2017, published by Gamesbox and Ultimate Games SA. This was the first paid Bad Dream game and the first Bad Dream game to release on Steam. Following Bad Dream Coma the next year was Bad Dream Fever, released in November of 2018. However, the Bad Dream series could not keep going on like this. From the developers' comments, it is clear that even though both games were received relatively well, money was ultimately being lost and Desert Fox moved to self-publishing to avoid all the extra costs that come with a publisher. The first self-published Bad Dream game is the other reason why it's hard to attach a specific number to the games in the Bad Dream series. Bad Dream Stories was released in September of 2021, and it is a remaster of the first 5 Bad Dream games, Butcher to Memories. So, do I consider Bad Dream Stories a separate game, 5 separate games, or do I consider the first 5 Bad Dream games to just fall under one label, Bad Dream Stories? I think for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be treating each of the first 5 as separate games and then review the collection as a whole in Bad Dream Stories, but I can definitely see the arguments for each side. If you're just starting the Bad Dream series, then it would make sense to only start with Bad Dream Stories as one game, and then just move on to either Coma or Bridge after. But remembering the release order, it's hard not to consider each of them separate games, so for this video, there are 10 games in the Bad Dream series. And the 10th one was the most recent one, Bad Dream Purgatory, released on June 23rd of 2023. Okay, so now that I've gotten the release order and all these ambiguities cleared up, I'm just going to get into the review for each game. Also going to clarify that the remastered footage will be used for the first 5 games since it is just the best looking and best playing version of the game out there. Butcher was the game that started it all, and the gameplay consists of picking up objects and moving between various rooms in the streets of an unknown city. However, there's also a butcher following you around, and he wants to cut off your fingers. Why, you might ask? Well, to make the absolutely delicious finger soup. It's finger looking good. Now, the visuals in this game, while quite simplistic, make for a nice, almost sketchbook-like feel to it. This works very well when, for example, cutting yourself on broken glass makes blood droplets appear as if you were actually dripping blood onto the page. The gameplay of Butcher, while nothing to write home about, being a point-and-click puzzle game where most of the puzzles are solved, shocker, by pointing and clicking, it still manages to make the puzzle solving itself an enjoyable experience. Some of the, I suppose, puzzles in Butcher are as brainless as finding a labeled key and moving it to the labeled door, and while playing through it for the first time I can't see anyone getting stuck on it, the real joy comes from replaying the game. I mentioned that the Butcher wants to cut off your fingers, but you don't have to have your fingers cut off. Depending on how you play the game, you could end with no fingers cut off, all the fingers cut off, or anywhere in between. The ability to find ways to change the ending, in my opinion, makes Bad Dream Butcher an excellent and satisfying experience. I should probably mention at this point, since it is a review and I'm going to be assigning review scores, my review scaling. For the 4 full-length experiences, that being Bad Dream Stories, Coma, Fever, and Purgatory, I'll just be using standard 10-point scoring, the most common across game reviews, with 10 being a masterpiece and 1 being a game that I wish I'd never played and nobody else should play either. Since the first 6 are much shorter experiences, I'll also give them a smaller review score. Each of the first 6 titles will be rated from 1 to 5 stars, and Bad Dream Butcher gets 5 stars from me. It's just a great way to spend 20 minutes or more if you want to get the secrets. The second game in the Bad Dream series is set in a graveyard, a fitting location for any horror game. In this one, your goal is to... I'm not quite sure what the goal is. Running around the graveyard, doing stuff, and being frightened by clowns and scarecrows seems to be the goal of this one. I think this one had some of the best scares of the Bad Dream series. These games aren't all that scary, as most of the horror just comes from the bleak atmosphere and the bloody images, but this one definitely has a few jump scares and surprises. Clicking a doorbell a few times, you would expect the same thing to happen each time, just a nice ringing noise that definitely wouldn't annoy anyone. But on the third time, a clown jump scare pops up. It was just a funny way of scaring the player, who likely gave in to the natural urge to repeatedly press a doorbell. But the actual puzzle solving of this game is where I have some complaints. While the puzzles in Butcher could be solved quite strangely, like using a fishing rod to fish out of a toilet, the puzzles in Graveyard seem to have little to no logic to them. For example, there's a puzzle where you have to collect flies and do something with them. I'm not sure what else you'd do with the 5 flies, but apparently it should make sense that you'd put them in a bee house where it would turn into black goo. And of course, what else would you do with black goo but slap it all over a headless boy's neck stump? Many of these puzzles felt less like I was making connections between the items I had and what I could interact with, and more like I just saw something I could click on, clicked on it, and something else happened. So, with all that in mind, I give Bad Dream Graveyard 4 stars. I still enjoyed it, would recommend it, but the lack of logic in most of the puzzles makes it a much less satisfying experience. Like changing the ending in Butcher, you could also do the same in Graveyard, but for Graveyard, I just didn't see the need to do it. It isn't like you unlock something entirely new for finding the secrets, you just have the satisfaction of completing something. It was good in Butcher because I loved Butcher, but in Graveyard it just feels pointless to play more just so that, the teddy bear has a few more limbs than it did before? I'm sure it would be just as satisfying as Butcher if you enjoyed Graveyard more, since these games each just provide more content if you liked the game already. But for me, I feel happy with the experience I had, and more would be pushing it. Bad Dream Hospital is the third Bad Dream game, and it is surprisingly enough, set in a hospital. This time, you have a clear goal. Finish this drawing. Except, oh no, you don't have anything to draw with. So, instead, you need to search the hospital for various bodily fluids and complete your drawing. Yeah, this one's an odd one. One of the things that this series develops is a good sense of humor. It isn't like the game just goes and tells jokes, but at some point you have to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. For example, after you go to the toilet and take some brown, the doctor catches you. So now that your brown is gone, you need to feed this big guy some laxatives and wait for him to produce more brown to finish your artwork. It's just a gross kind of juvenile type of thing that just feels somehow more humorous in the dark and bloody setting. Aside from the humor, the puzzles in this game I absolutely loved. Not just because it gave me an excuse to touch human excrement, but because of just how much the puzzles made sense. Give laxatives to someone, he produces more brown. Get a coin, go to the vending machine. Get a sticker, cover up this weird eye that's been watching you shower. For the most part, the puzzles just make sense in this game, and they aren't ridiculously easy like moving a labeled key to a labeled door. Even better is figuring out how to get the other ending in this game. I won't spoil it here, but at the end of Hospital, if you played it like I did, there's a pretty big reveal that just adds to the humor and makes you realize what you could do differently the next time. And unlike in Butcher, there is actually a different ending if you finish the game differently. It isn't just like there's a different number of fingers in the pot. This game definitely gets 5 stars from me. I loved the experience from the humor to the puzzles to the still spooky atmosphere. Definitely even better than Butcher. Bad Dream Cyclops, the fourth Bad Dream game, is set in a Cyclops. Wait, that's not right. It's set in actually this town area, which seems to be a mix of a medieval village and a modern one. I think this one is the least interesting setting of the Bad Dream games. It's not scary, it's not creepy, it's just a normal village. There's even this kind of adorable squid-looking thing here to comfort you. I'd also say that the puzzles in this game are very simple, yet also kind of annoying. My main complaint is these coffins, which you have to click on either multiple times to remember which one has which, or click on each one each time you need something from them. It would be far better if instead there were just one room with each of the skeletons in there. A small issue, sure, but this is a small game. Outside of that small annoyance, the puzzles are just easy. The first Tooth Fairy one took some thought, but then the same puzzle with the Tooth Fairy is reused a few more times, and it's not like the answers are any different than the first time. Although, I will say that I did appreciate the humor of the next fairy puzzles. That is one thing that did right. Bad Dream Cyclops gets 3 stars from me. It was alright, but just had a pretty dull environment and equally dull puzzles. Worth playing if you liked the other games, but not a good standalone experience. It's funny that this game is called Memories, because I could only remember one thing about it, the setting. It's in this house by a lake. I had to go back and rewatch my gameplay footage of this game since it really was a very forgettable experience. That isn't specifically due to the game's problems, but it is mainly because it's the shortest one of the first games and Coma took what Memories did, but better. Yeah, this game really isn't much to talk about. A neat idea with taking items from drawings and using them in other drawings, but this game is so short and linear that it's hard to come up with anything else. It feels more like one of those games that you just play through to watch things happen and see the story unfold instead of a puzzle game, and it's fine, but that's all it is. Fine. 3 stars for being alright. So, the collection as a whole, Bad Dream Stories. The 6th game on this list, but technically the 9th game if you want to go by release order, or the first game if you're really going to be that guy. I think my favorite thing about this collection as a whole is how the puzzle solving works. Each game has differences in how much I liked the puzzles, but they all seem to go under a similar philosophy. Due to the generally small environments and auto-selection of inventory items, it would be easy to finish each game by going into each room and clicking on every object. This could be seen as a flaw, but I think it is one of the best things these games have going for them. In most puzzle games, if you get really stuck on a puzzle, you're just kind of left there to either wait long enough to happen to randomly guess correctly, give up, or look up a guide. The most shameful way of finishing a puzzle. In Bad Dream Stories, many of the puzzles give you the satisfaction of figuring it out, but also give you the opportunity to just click around if you get too stuck on a certain puzzle. There's a fine line between puzzles that are too easy and puzzles that are too hard, and while these Bad Dream games have both, it at least gives you the opportunity to skip past the ones that are too hard. That's not to say that it works for the better all the time, as like I said, Cyclops and Memories just felt like games you could stroll through without difficulty. Butcher and Hospital were the perfect mix of difficulty and logic, and those experiences I think worked quite well with this way of puzzle solving. Graveyard needed this the most because without it, I don't think the first thing that would pop into my head is just throw some blood onto the scarecrow and give it the severed teddy bear head. Bad Dream Stories just ends up being a great casual puzzle game, and it's because of this. Also, I should probably mention the differences between the remaster and the free version. First, the graphics are noticeably changed. In my opinion, it just looks far neater without changing the atmosphere too much. The other change is a couple of quality of life updates. Now there's a question mark icon if you will be able to click on something but can't at the moment. And there are also arrows to indicate if you can walk between areas or not. These quality of life updates prevent wasted time caused by just moving the mouse around and wandering to find something to click on, and it just makes for a more enjoyable experience. Overall, I give this collection an 8.5 out of 10. I really did have a great time playing these games and would totally recommend buying Bad Dream Stories on Steam. I didn't think the games at the end were all that great, but they were still built upon the same formula that worked well for the other games. And it would be hard to rate any lower since this collection included both Butcher and Hospital, both incredible experiences. If the other three were bad, then yeah, but they're at the very least alright, and each had their moments. Unlike the previous Bad Dream games, Bridge isn't just set on a bridge, but also in a hospital. In fact, the same one from Bad Dream Hospital, although the layout's changed a bit. The bridge section really only lasts a minute or two, making me wonder if it was only included so that the title of the game wouldn't be Bad Dream Hospital 2. The bridge part, unlike the simple puzzle solving in Memories, seems like it can just be solved by walking to the end of the bridge, meeting the spooky worm, and now you're in the hospital. The hospital is where the new mechanic to Bad Dream Bridge is shown off. Now, instead of automatically selecting items to use, you have to click on the item in your inventory before using it. This mechanic adds a slight bit more depth to the puzzle solving since it no longer allows you to just move the cursor around and click on random objects. Still, if you find something clickable, then you can just check everything in your inventory against that object and see if anything does something. For the most part, I think this inventory mechanic is a good addition to the gameplay. Like I mentioned in Bad Dream Stories, being able to try everything and eventually come to a solution works because it prevents the player from getting completely stuck, but that doesn't mean that the player should be doing that every time. It's far more satisfying to actually work toward a puzzle and use your brain to figure it out rather than just happening to click on the right object. With the inventory mechanic, now you might see an object that's clickable and realize what inventory item to use. You figured out something which you don't get from automatic object selection. There is a slight problem to the inventory mechanic in Bridge specifically. In order to access the inventory, you need to bring up a separate menu, which was changed to a simple sidebar in Coma. The reason for this is that it can be very annoying to open it up, spend extra time away from the game. I think the worst example of this is a puzzle at the vending machine where you have to open your inventory to use a button, take the button back, open the inventory again, use the button, take it back, open the inventory again, and then use the button for a final time. It's just way more steps than necessary, and I also feel like that's a pretty ridiculous solution to the puzzle. Oh yeah, the puzzles. They exist, I guess. I don't think there was a single one where I had a hard time finding the solution, but there was a lot of wasted time from doors that were previously locked just suddenly becoming unlocked with no indication. Hospital did somewhat have that with the fact that certain things triggered you being able to walk further down the hallway or not, but the difference between that hospital and this hospital is that it's pretty obvious to see the difference between an absent hallway and a present hallway, but a locked door and an unlocked door only changes when you click on it. With all that in mind, I give this game 2 stars. That may seem awfully low after I just praised the inventory mechanic, but the simple puzzles and just ridiculous door mechanics make it hard to recommend this to anyone after Coma's release, which did everything Bridge did, but better. The inventory would work in a game with puzzles designed for it, not in this game where the inventory just adds an extra annoyance. It's a bit unfair to judge a game based on what came after, yet Coma just completely removes any reason to want to play Bridge. In the present, you should skip this game. The only reason for someone to play it is for completionism or if you were waiting for Coma to release in early 2015. Bad Dream Coma released in early 2017, and I honestly think those extra 2 years is what stopped the game from becoming Bridge, but more. For one thing, the graphical improvements are very noticeable. Everything looks far cleaner than Bridge, and the game can actually be played in full screen. Another part that shows how the game likely evolved past its original concept is, like I mentioned earlier, a better inventory mechanic and a better design. The puzzle solutions are logical, yet not so obvious that they don't require some thought. So, now to talk about the game itself. Coma is much longer than the previous games, and it can take a few hours to complete on a first run through. It's split into 8 chapters, and each chapter is about the length of a previous Bad Dream game, if not longer. The game starts out on a bridge, and this bridge works as a great introduction to the game and how it's changed from the previous games. Right on the first screen, there's a crow. In Bridge, there were spiders that you could just punch if you felt like it. But here, there's a crow, and now you can punch it. Why would you, though? It doesn't seem to be the solution to any puzzle, and besides, crows are just cool birds. Still, you decide to try it. The crow is dead, but you're not satisfied. Your bloodlust rages for more crows to kill, and you start punching every bird you see. Then, just as you're looking for more crows, something pops up on your screen. Birds hate you. You're now stuck on the bad ending route because you are a bad person who punches birds to death for no reason other than wishing to see them die. The game has 3 endings, bad, neutral, and good, but it's notable for the way it handles this. While doing a bad action will end up with you getting the bad ending, it also gives you a status. By the end, you will have multiple statuses that affect different parts of the game. I'm going to talk about the endings and statuses later, but for now, let's get back to Chapter 1, The Bridge. Another new aspect of Coma is the dialogue. Most characters, when you click on them, will say something. They will typically either say a throwaway line if they don't need anything, or they'll give you something to do. I really think the system adds a lot to the game since it no longer feels so empty. I understand that it adds to the horror if the player feels alone, but when you're spending a few hours in a world instead of 20 minutes, a more lively world gives the experience a nice extra bit of flavor. And now on the subject of horror. Coma makes the decision to instead focus more on a creepy atmosphere and bloody images, and the scares are few and far between. As a result, the few scares in the game worked quite well, but ultimately it makes it hard to call this a horror game. It's certainly a dark and creepy game, but a horror one? Jump scares aren't what defines horror, but being a point and click game, it doesn't really have much other horror to offer. That being said, it's also important to question why you'd play this game. Are you playing a dark point and click game to get scared, or to enjoy a well crafted world with monsters and spooky locations? Bad Dream Coma knows what it's going for in the horror department, and it's because of that that it works. It isn't scary, but it's definitely unsettling. The final element of Coma that the Bridge chapter shows off is the puzzle solving. It's still just find an item and click on another item with that item, but as I said earlier, it does it quite well. It feels nice to find a battery and think, out of the few objects here, I bet the remote control would need a battery. This then turns into you driving a remote control car into a rock and using a magnifying glass to look at the car and finding out that there was a drunk driver in the miniature car who actually drove the car into a boulder and you take the alcohol from him. Arbitrary and ridiculous, yet also logical given the items you have to work with. In this way, the puzzles are just fun to solve, whether they're easy or hard. Even if the puzzles I got quite stuck on, there wasn't one where I found the solution and thought the solution doesn't make any sense. Coma likes to have a bit of fun with the puzzles, and it makes it fun for the player to discover these solutions. There are definitely a few puzzles that feel incredibly out of place as a result, like this one part where you literally just play spot the difference. There are also 2 others which feel like the developer was just trying them out for the next game, Fever, because of how underused they are in this game. In Chapter 1, there's a paperclip outside of your inventory that you can move around on the screen to block lightning. There is no other object in the game that you can move around like that, just this paperclip. In chapters 2 and 5, there's a computer you can use which has a couple of puzzles involved within it, but it doesn't quite fit the theme of Coma's more meta puzzles. Coma definitely has a sense of meta-ness in addition to the absurdity of the puzzles, addressing the hand-drawn art style directly. There's an eraser that lets you write people out of existence, a pen that you can use to just draw locations which don't exist yet, and even parts of the screen can be ripped out and put back together. The computer is used again in Fever, and it fits Fever's themes much better than the hand-drawn nature of Coma. I suppose I should briefly cover the rest of the chapters of Coma. I'm not going to go super in depth on each of the chapters, since for one thing, although the chapters are all different, I'd be repeating much of what I said earlier, and for another thing, I don't want to spoil everything about this game. Chapter 2 features the return to the hospital, a bit mixed up from Bad Dream Hospital, but it still seems to be the same hospital. And, well, it just feels great to come to the hospital under better circumstances than Bad Dream Bridge. Chapter 3 returns to the graveyard from Bad Dream Graveyard, this time very mixed up. In fact, so mixed up that the navigation doesn't make any sense. Normally, clicking multiple times in one direction leads to traveling multiple times in that direction. But here, sometimes it'll turn you around, sometimes going in one direction and then turning right will turn you around, and then sometimes to really screw you up, the directions actually make sense. I still really like the graveyard due to its creepy atmosphere, but it took a lot of time to get used to the location. Chapter 4 follows it up by being my personal least favorite of the game, being set in a forest, one of two original locations. First, you explore the forest a bit, and then this guy tells you he needs to rest. Then, you go back and find a list of ingredients to collect. Great. Instead of fun puzzles, you're now just on a fetch quest. To make it worse, the ingredients on this list are things that were previously unclickable. When I played this part, there were some things I remembered as odd that I couldn't click on, and those I was able to get quite quickly, but certain objects that just looked unmemorable and I moved over it with my cursor made it so instead of going back and picking up the object I missed, I went back and didn't know what object I missed, and I just had to move my mouse around and see what was now clickable. There was even a wooden stick I took note of looking weird, and that I specifically remembered that I couldn't click on, so I didn't even go to where the stick was because all that I remembered was that there was nothing clickable over there. This is one of my biggest complaints with the game as a whole. Objects that just don't look like anything. In Chapter 1, there was this battery under the tarp or whatever, but before clicking on it, the battery didn't look like a battery. The way the tarp folds around the battery makes it look like the battery is a lot longer. Something like maybe a hose or a pipe, just like this other pipe in the same place that the player can't do anything with. It's just extra wasted time that comes from not being able to tell what something is rather than not recognizing it as a solution to the puzzle. Luckily, other than the forest, it's really a small part of the game. There was that battery in Chapter 1, but nothing else from that chapter, and it didn't even waste a minute of my time, just more time than I enjoy wasted. Back on track to Chapter 5, Bus Stop. Except it's just the hospital again. Which I am quite glad about, because I'm not a big fan of the bus stop itself. No formal complaints, just not my thing. The hospital now has the return of the nurse, looking considerably better than in her previous games. This makes it so that your goal is to get your treatment after everyone else's turn in line. I really liked that Coma found a new way to use the hospital, since of course I have mentioned before that I love the location, and it's great to see it used well. To progress through the line, you need to complete other puzzles around the hospital, and then when the line moves, more puzzles become available for you to complete. Time progression like that isn't exactly logical, but it's not like it would make for an enjoyable experience to just wait for everyone to take their turn in line. Chapter 6 is the apartment, probably the spookiest place in the game. Dark rooms, scares, confined spaces. A very good chapter. Chapter 7 is a return to the house from memories, and it does just what memories does, but better. You can use objects from pictures, both in other pictures and in the real world, and it's just a really nice chapter. It also provides a lot of context to the story, which makes sense because it is right before Chapter 8, the end. The story of the game is a relatively simple one, but just as I said about the addition of characters who speak, it adds more flavor to the game. It appears you've fallen asleep, and now you're having a bad dream. Oddly enough, I don't think the character of this game is actually in a coma, but it would be reasonable to assume that when you start the game. This guy in the hospital explains the main concept of the story. When you do bad things, the world gets worse. It connects to the endings, and they are one of my favorite parts of the game. But not just the endings, the statuses are also important. Being able to influence not just the ending of the story, but also many other parts is a really creative way to introduce player control to a previously mostly linear game, and it works very well. After finishing the game, I felt obligated to also get both of the other endings. I got the bad ending first, since I just decided it would be best to play the game without restarting any levels, and it was quite fun trying to repeat the game but solve the puzzles in a way that wasn't bad. How can I get an eyeball without stabbing this guy in the eye? Or how can I remove these spiders without punching them? In addition to trying to solve puzzles differently, each chapter plays a bit differently. If you don't kill the bird in chapter 2, then in Graveyard there's no longer a scarecrow, and you have to figure out how to get out of the graveyard without the scarecrow's help. The forest has different ingredients lists depending on what route you're on, and there are plenty more changes. I'm not going to say the replaying was perfect, because like I mentioned in the forest, many things that weren't clickable in the bad route were clickable in the good route and neutral route, resulting in much wasted time. Still, it was incredible that this much new content would be in each route, because most games would just give you 2 new endings and call it quits. There doesn't appear to be much of a real-world implication for the story since it takes place inside your bad dream, but you do get to learn more about the characters and who the player character is in real life through each ending. Overall, I give Bad Dream Coma a 9 out of 10. I really loved this game and I loved replaying it. The story, although nothing amazing, was a sweet touch to a really good game. I can't say it was perfect since the problems I mentioned were quite noticeable, but I'd be surprised if you played the game and didn't enjoy it. I bought it expecting a short puzzle game, and while I got that, I also got something I didn't expect. A short puzzle game not just good enough to replay, but good enough to replay twice. If you haven't, then check out Bad Dream Coma. If my reviews and the Steam reviews are any indication, you'll very likely have a good time. If Bad Dream Coma felt like a departure from what Bridge was going to be, then Bad Dream Fever is just from a whole different game series. Honestly, in almost all aspects, Bad Dream Fever really does not seem like a Bad Dream game. It's still a point-and-click game, but almost everything about it has changed. Again, the most striking thing is the visuals. Every other Bad Dream game had a simplistic look to it, but this just straight up looks good. No longer are these rooms filled with empty space, now each room is fully detailed and it still looks great in the hand-drawn style. Fever honestly benefits greatly from this style. I mentioned in Coma that my biggest complaint was that it was unclear which objects could be clicked on and going back to click on previously unclickable objects, but the art style in Fever fixes all of that. Now, objects look exactly like what they're supposed to. The battery in Coma didn't look much like anything, but here it's clear what each object is supposed to be. There's only one part where I couldn't tell something was a gas stove, but that's only because I've never used one in real life. I was a bit concerned that the complex art style would show me a ton of objects and make it confusing to see which ones I could click on, but it ended up making it easier instead. Each object is more memorable and stands out, so even when going back to find previously unclickable objects, it's not all that hard to figure out what is needed to solve the next puzzle. This game's puzzle solving is my favorite of the Bad Dream series, continuing to have creative and often absurd puzzles, but managing to avoid the often too easy puzzles found in Coma and previous games. There's one new mechanic here which is used occasionally that I didn't like, and that is the paperclip mechanic from Coma. Now you can move certain objects around only within a room. This didn't seem to add anything to the game other than an extra annoyance. If I need to move a few boxes out of the way, then I have to put them in a specific spot in the room because it won't let me place the box anywhere else. At that point, I have to question the mechanics need to exist, since the same thing would be accomplished by just clicking on the box to move it to that specific spot. There are a few times where this happens, and none of them are necessary. The only time where I thought it added something is when using a tool to interact with a different object within the room, because it tells the player that the tool can only be used in this specific room, but that only happens a total of 2 times in the game. But because the mechanic is used so sparsely and it only serves as a small annoyance, I can't really call it my biggest complaint with the game. My biggest complaints with the game are the atmosphere, story, and secrets. First of all, the atmosphere. The game is just not even a creepy game anymore. There are some dead bodies and this kind of spooky robot, but that's it. That is all the horror this game has to offer. The dead bodies don't even have blood on them, because there's no blood in this game. Well, not really. The only blood is found in a painting of a screenshot from Coma. I'm not going to say that you need blood for a horror game, but it adds to the feeling that this isn't a bad dream game. Bad dream games all have a pretty excessive use of blood and gore, which, while debatable in its effectiveness, unites the games. This game, it isn't horror, it isn't darker than your average shooter game because hey, that one has dead bodies too, although Call of Duty has blood. This game just has nice visuals, not spooky ones. Then the story of the game. As is explained by this yet-to-be-named woman with a plague mask, the town you're in has a plague of ink. Anyone who touches the ink will have their blood replaced by ink and die. Except for you, the main character, because you're like the main character or something, there isn't really an explanation. Although you aren't allowed to touch the ink anyways. The story ends up explaining that the world, believe it or not, is a game, called Bad Dream Fever. I liked how meta Coma was, but this just feels sort of obvious. Like the developer just thought fourth wall breaks were cool, so what if the player finds out that this is actually a video game? It does make for some great puzzles, such as repairing the options menu and using the in-game credits to solve a puzzle, but that type of fourth wall breaking is just so overused. Speaking of overused, I'm going to get into some spoilers here about what the story turns into, so skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear them. Basically, you find out that the developer of the game is the one spreading the ink. The developer appears to be a different developer than the actual developer, since they're given different names, but it still feels a lot like a self-insert. It turns out that he's spreading the ink because he's trying to redraw each character and achieve perfection, but he fails every time and lets them die. The story ends with a prototype version of the game being loaded up, with each character in their original state, and the plague mask woman, who is named Ella, letting you know this in a letter. The meaning of this story seems to just be that chasing perfection is impossible and it's best to be satisfied with what you have, but it's just not done well here. It's made incredibly obvious to the player through all the dialogue, and it's just simply not that interesting of a theme. In this game, it comes across more as the developer saying, I'm not all that happy with how this game is turning out, so I'm going to make the game about that and tell all the players that I'm actually fine with how the game turned out in the end. The story of the game just seems more like the developer getting out his frustrations instead of creating something for the player. I wouldn't have so much of a problem with the story if it weren't such a large focus of the game. It's a far more dialogue heavy game than Coma was, so it really gives the story a spotlight. Coma's story wasn't amazing or anything, just a nice touch to a great game, but it knew that, and it didn't completely focus on the story. The game makes the mistake of believing that the story is the most important part. And that leads to my final complaint against the game, the secrets. There are none. I loved replaying Coma, Butcher, and Hospital, so to have a full-length game and not have any secrets or different endings after Coma did so well with it is very disappointing. Different endings would change the story, and apparently the story is so important to focus on that the endings can be removed. But the story's focus does lead to one thing that I liked that was missing from Coma, the humor. I really liked the character of unnamed Plague Mask Woman, because she added flavor to an otherwise bland story. Whereas the humor in Bad Dream Hospital came from the absurdity of the situation, now it comes from a more typical place, people being funny. Or in this case, since everyone else is dead, a person being funny. It just really adds to the experience to try out various puzzle solutions only for her to comment on how what the player is thinking of doing is ridiculous, or just some other humorous comment. There's also the small details, such as collecting ingredients for medicine when one of the ingredients happens to be flowers. You check back in her workshop later after the medicine is made, and you might notice that the flowers are just sitting in a vase on a table. It's hard to describe what makes these things funny, and I know it doesn't sound all that funny when I say it out loud, because describing a joke is just never as funny as the joke. But playing the game, it was hard not to smile or laugh at these things. So, I give Bad Dream Fever a 7 out of 10. It was good, just not a good Bad Dream game. Way too much story focus, no replayability, but great puzzles and dialogue. It wasn't a good Bad Dream game, because it just didn't have the same style or horror atmosphere, it was just a typical point and click game. I'd recommend it if you know what you're getting into, but expecting more Bad Dream, you might be disappointed. The most recent game in the Bad Dream series, as of this video, is Bad Dream Purgatory. Another major shift in how the game works, as it now has 3D environments, described as 2.5D, but it really feels more like 3D. It also returns back to the art style of Bad Dream stories in Coma. Honestly, while I liked that art style in those games, here it just looks not good. There is way too much empty space in a 3D environment, and it makes the game look like it doesn't have much to offer. That's not to say the style always works poorly, because blood and gore stand out way more. That's right, Bad Dream is back. Blood, gore, and fingernails abound. Despite being 3D, Purgatory is far more Bad Dream-like than Fever was. The game does another weird thing, and splits itself into two modes, uninspired story and open world. In the story mode, there's only one path you can go on, and you will get the same ending no matter what. In the open world, more options are opened up, and you can get different endings and secrets. The name Open World is a bit strange here since it's quite a small place you have to explore, but it does technically fit the definition by being non-linear. The story mode honestly seems like a demo for the main game. In the open world, you can even follow the exact path you followed in the story. Basically, your goal is to give these characters some purpose. They've been written and designed, but whoever designed these characters doesn't have a use for them. So, your goal is to give them some fulfillment in their lives. But what's this blank-faced creature over here? Maybe he'd like some scissors? It turns out the purpose you're giving these characters is an incredibly brutal death. such as this man being stabbed to death, cut apart, and having his face stolen. Now you need to appease these creatures by giving them some yummy flesh to eat and skin to wear. The story ends with your death as one of the creatures deems your arm as good enough food. Except that's not all, because there's one more run through of the story. This time everyone's been reanimated poorly, and this time it ends with you dying from the ink plague featured in Fever. It's quite noticeable that this feels like a normal bad dream plot instead of Fever's plot. The plot itself is, just like Coma, taking a backseat to the puzzles and exploration. And also, the plot is quite dark, probably even more so than in any previous game. It feels a bit strange to be praising this game for being like an earlier Bad Dream game rather than on its own merits, but sometimes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Then again, one of my favorite parts of this game comes from Fever's experimentation, so maybe it's worth trying things and seeing what sticks. It's not clear what works best. The puzzle solving part of this campaign, well, it still works. Still uses logic instead of arbitrary puzzles, still satisfying to progress. It seems the developer has learned a lot since his first 5 games, because every one of the full-length experiences has had these good puzzles. I didn't mention it before, but Fever's inventory mechanic works just like the first 5 games with auto-selection of items. In Purgatory, when you click on something, it tells you which items you can use, if any. I like this, because not only is it object which things are clickable, um, not only is it obvious which things are clickable, it also makes it easy to remember these objects when coming back, and it also gives the player an amount of choice. Except, instead of giving the player a choice to waste time on different items, it gives the player a choice that might actually matter. Is this actually where I'm supposed to use this item, or is this character going to insult me for showing them it? Choices feel meaningful, even if they don't in the story mode, but they feel like they are. When I played the story for the first time, I was convinced that there was another option that didn't involve everyone's death, but that was just because it seemed like there was one. Unfortunately, all that I could do was sit and watch everyone suffer. And that was actually a shame to see, because my favorite part of Purgatory is the characters. Some of my favorites are Gravedigger Guy, Bartender Woman, and especially Nicholas. Despite being supposedly unmemorable and unused characters, I remember all of them, although not their names. It really seems like Desert Fox learned a lot from Fever, taking what made that game work and leaving the rest. Gravedigger Guy is just a grouchy old man who is only here for his job. Bartender Woman really doesn't like you or the situation everyone's in, but also doesn't seem to care enough to do anything. And Nicholas wants to pursue an education but has a lack of reading materials. If Fever hadn't had such a focus on the Plague Mask Lady, then I doubt there would be as much to say about the characters of this game. Also, the characters continue the humor present in Fever. Pretty much every time you give an item to the person, they say something about it, which most often at least made me smile. For example, there's a puzzle in Purgatory that involves putting your eye in a pot to summon the Eye Fairy, a reference to Bad Dream Cyclops. In order to find about this, you'd need to get a paper that describes how to use the Eye Fairy. Later on, in the open world, you might get a fingernail. If you happen to show this fingernail to the bartender, she will then give you a paper that describes how to summon the Nail Fairy. I especially like that you can give the Nail Fairy to Nicholas as reading material for his education, and then he calls out that he thinks someone's just being mean to you. Not only did I find this whole interaction funny, but I also enjoyed the references to the earlier ridiculous parts of the Bad Dream games. This game is filled with references, and while it isn't just a nostalgia trip through previous locations as Coma was, it has some pretty clear influences. There's the weird pig cat thing from Butcher, another baby whose skull you can smash open like in Coma, and the whole ink plague thing from Fever. The game's story also has pretty clear influences from Fever, acknowledging that these are unused characters in-game and being meta like that. The references and influences in this game, which I can't help but see as saying, hey, remember this thing from this game that you liked? Still work as an addition to the game. If the game were filled with these references and didn't do anything new with them, then yeah, it would just be an excuse for nostalgia, but the game does do more than that. The Eye Fairy thing from Cyclops is turned into a new mechanic in the open world where you can decide whether the fairy lives or dies, and the story's meta, but it takes a backseat to the gameplay. I really feel like much of this game just takes the experiments from previous games and only keeps the ones that worked well. But there's one other thing that keeps me from recommending this game wholeheartedly. I mentioned the puzzle solving in the linear campaign as just being more Bad Dream, but the puzzle solving in the open world is something entirely different. There's no right way to go being an open world and all, and many more paths for you to take, making the puzzles far more non-linear than even Coma. In Coma, it was obvious that you just shouldn't do a certain thing to get a certain ending, because it would give you a status that said you wouldn't get the ending. Here, you have to use your head to figure out what causes what to happen. And this is also what made me end up quitting the game before it finished. Not because I actually need to think, but because there is no indicator that I'm heading in the right direction or not. I don't even know what the ending is supposed to be. I don't know if there are even more than two endings, and I don't know what on earth I'm supposed to be doing with these coins. Gravedigger says that I should give him 5 coins for a grave, but you can give him fewer and he digs you a grave just the same. An achievement even says that giving him 5 coins is pointless, so I'm not going to try and figure out how to get the 5 coins because it would lead me to the grave, and the game says that, deep down, you know the story doesn't end in the grave. What does that mean? Am I supposed to avoid the grave at all costs? Does doing different things in one route affect another route? It did in the story mode, but it doesn't seem to do anything here. Would a 5 coin grave help that? I'm just assuming it doesn't because of the achievement description, but part of me wonders if that was the right choice. The most guidance appears to come from the achievements list, but I can't tell if any of these are even useful. Pretty much all of the achievements just look like a typical achievement for finding a fun secret except for one, Canon Ending, which says, let the guy read some books before he goes on to write the next chapter. I can only assume that is referring to Nicholas, but it doesn't really help me get the canon ending. Sure, I could try looking for a book, but nobody I talk to mentions anything about a book other than Nicholas, and if he knew how to get one, he'd tell me. The rest of the achievements just seem like things to get if you've completed the game and want to continue playing, so I haven't tried to get any of them. Some seem like they offer slight clues, only to really offer nothing. The only achievement I got was accidental when I tried to recreate the story mode in the open world. I spent 4 hours in the open world, as much as it would take to beat Coma or Fever once, and I found one single achievement out of 17. So, with all that said, I'm still going to give Bad Dream Purgatory an 8 out of 10. I played the game for an hour to finish the story mode, and the next 2 hours in the open world were filled with discovering new things and trying to find out the next thing to do. Those 3 hours I really enjoyed were filled with humor and horror, and featured many things that I may have actually figured out. Then, I began to realize that I was accomplishing basically nothing in the open world, although I was still finding many new things. Those last 2 hours were basically me opening up the game whenever I thought of something I might not have tried yet, and seeing if that got me any closer to what might be the canon ending. It didn't. I got 5 hours of gameplay out of Bad Dream Purgatory, and while I definitely can't say I loved every second of it, I can say there was a lot I loved about this game. And it would really be unfair to give this game a lower score because of what ultimately was a skill issue. I don't tend to play many puzzle games, and I liked the Bad Dream series because of how accessible they were. This one isn't accessible, and that's fine, but this review wouldn't be complete without mentioning that. I'm not giving the game a higher score than what I personally think the game was to me, because the game to me was a great game with characters I loved, just quite frustrating. But there's a big difference between the frustration I felt at times with Fever, when I was annoyed at having to listen to all the dialogue as the story was just explained to me, and Purgatory being annoyed that I can't see more dialogue. Purgatory is a game that I could have loved if I had been able to figure everything out, but it is a game that will at least stay in my head for a lot longer than the supposed uninteresting characters believed it would. I wasn't originally planning to make this review. The first video I uploaded to my channel was a review of a game called Discrum, and I was going to review another game, but got bored trying to do it. So, I shifted to gameplay videos, not because I thought I'd have any success as a gaming YouTuber in 2023, but to learn the algorithm so that I can release a video I actually do care about and hope for an audience to share it with. That video is still in production, and I hope to have it done within the next month, but this video just kinda came to me. I started the Bad Dream series because I thought a simple short horror game series might be fun for my YouTube channel. Then, after playing through stories in Coma, I realized that this was the video I wanted to make. Those games, which I was thinking of as just simple, fun experiences, ended up leaving enough of an impression on me to write 9,736 words, and I really wish it were 10,000 because that would satisfy me, but I'm not going to bloat this video any more than it already is. Still, 9,736 words is far more than any of the longest papers I've ever written for any school project, although I'm sure I'll write some long ones when I start college next fall. Although there wasn't a single game I said was perfect, I cannot recommend playing them enough. They're cheap, and you'll recommend them after playing them. I can't say that I'm going to be thinking of them in a month, but right now I'm just amazed that these games with so much good in them are so underrecognized. Coma is the most popular, but even that game didn't sell a lot compared to other popular games. Then, Stories, despite having 100% positive reviews from everyone who's played it so far, has had little attention drawn to it. Purgatory appears to have even fewer people who know about it, and it seems like the Bad Dream series is fading away. I hope this video does well. The Bad Dream series is an incredibly unique one that needs more attention drawn to it. Also, I like the idea of money. That's my other top motivator for making this video. I'm not going to give out BS about making this video for a noble cause. Still, if you made it this far, then please do yourself a favor and buy a Bad Dream game. Start with Stories. It's $6, has 100% positive reviews, and is a great time. I really doubt you'll regret that decision. And finally, thanks for watching.